today I want to show you a little demonstration of how GitLab can support you by using features that are hidden behind feature flags and so dynamically enabled and disabled during runtime. In order to get started, let me create a new project. When you create a new project in GitLab, you can base that on a pre-existing template, and I happen to have created a feature flag template for this very purpose. So I'm going to use that template. So I call that project, let's say FF demo, and I place it into a group that is named cluster. I've named it because I have a Kubernetes cluster pre-configured within that very group. So I quickly create that project. The project, when it's created, comes with a few predefined labels as well as some issue templates that I want to use. But before I can really make use of that, I want to clone this very project because I do need a little bit of source code for this very project, and I happen to have that source code lying around on my local hard drive. So let's get started by cloning this repository, and let's go here. Let's git clone that here. So that gives me that project. So let's cd into that project and get some source code into that that I'm having around on my hard drive. So that's in a different folder. It's one level up, it's in start, and I'm gonna put it in here. So what I'm now having is a couple of Golang source code files, a Docker file to create myself a Docker image finally. So I want to have that uploaded and pushed to GitLab. So what I'm basically doing is I'm git adding all the stuff that is in here, and I'm committing it to with a commit message. That's my initial import. As the project in GitLab is making use of auto DevOps and will thus execute a pipeline every time I'm pushing something to that project, and I don't want to do that right now. I'm skipping the CI job. I'll leave that for a little later, and I'll ultimately push it up to GitLab. So here we go. That's of course wrong. So that stuff should be now appearing in GitLab. So that's cool. So I do have the source code files lying around, and when I really want to work and do some actual stuff with it, everything in GitLab, we used to say, starts with an issue. I based this issue on a template, an issue template that I've named feature flag implement, and the feature flag I will later on call FF demo. Just sorry, and so FF demo, and let's give that a start by assigning it to myself and submitting that issue after I gave it a title, implement FF demo. Here we go. So right now I'm having that issue. I've defined the unique feature flag name to be FF demo. That's fine, that's done. Very often you want to make sure when a feature is in the application only for a short duration of time because you're doing a marketing campaign or whatever, you might want to create another issue for yourself to make sure that later on in the process you're going to remove that feature flag again in order to keep that sane. So let's create that issue here as well. Remove FF demo. We'll base that also on a template, and the template's going to be called feature flag remove. And I'll leave that unassigned for now because that's good for later. But what I want to do, I want to certainly want to link that issue to the already pre-existing issue. That's the first one here, to implement the feature flag so that I'm having a relationship that I can follow later on. So let's add that very issue in here and link the two together. What that basically ends up with is we do have an issue board, and on that very issue board we're seeing the different feature flags with the scope labels. One is feature flag implement, the other one is feature flag remove, and that's all pretty cool. So I get I jump over to that implement feature flag demo again. I'll check off this one. I've optionally created the other issue, and that's pretty cool. The next thing I want to do is I want to ensure that we have some CI variables for this project defined. So one is going to be KDS secret unleash URL, and the other one is KDS secret unleash instance ID. So what is this unleash thing? So GitLab, in order to work with feature flags, uses the unleash API. That basically means the GitLab instance acts as some kind of server that the client application then gets to talk to figure out what features should be enabled and what not. For that to happen, the pod that is running the application on the Kubernetes cluster needs to find that GitLab instance, and it does need to sort of authenticate to it and by submitting an instance ID. I want to have that in the CA variable section. So just quickly put that on the clipboard and quickly go here, link, so go to this one as well as to this location. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to my variable section here, making sure that we're adding the variable that I was already talking about, and then check out a feature flag configuration section that is available in GitLab. And there's a button called configure, and you find the appropriate value here. So that's the API URL that we want to talk to. So I'll copy that on the clipboard. Okay, and the next thing is going to be that I'm putting that value in here. So that's the first one. That's okay. The next one is going to be that K8S secret unleash instance ID. Let's copy that onto the clipboard and go to that variable section one more time. Place it in here, and we need to find the value. The value is also in here. So this is the instance ID. We copy that to the clipboard, and we should be good to go with this one. A final variable that I want to put in here is a variable Postgres enabled to be true. I'm doing this because my application makes use of user information that is actually stored in a database. For that to happen, I need to have Postgres enabled. That comes in handy with Auto DevOps. So let's add this in here as well. So that's cool. Let's get out of this and here. So go back to our issue. So we've done that. We ensured that the CI variables are set. And the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to create a merge request to implement that very feature. You can do this right away from the GitLab issue in here. So we're just clicking on create merge request. So let's do this. Let's do this. In that very merge request, this will be the container for the implementation and the review environment for reviewing the implementation of that feature behind a feature flag in GitLab. This is obviously linked to the issue itself. That's cool. And what we can do is we can open our source code up in the web IDE. So let's do that. and head to the section of that source code. That's some Golang routines in here, and I do happen to have controllers folders with a user.go file. And for that feature flag to work, I need to make a few changes in here. So I need to make use of the unleash SDK, and I've prepared something. So in the code already, we would normally find out this this functionality to return a message called hello world, as we would all expect. And there is an if section, and in that if clause here, I'm returning never see this because it's false, but we're going to change that here. And the way we're going to change that is we are getting rid of these slashes, and so that the if clause reads if unleash is enabled some feature flag. That's obviously not the right name, so let's change that to ffdemo. We're using this together with a context, and in that very context, for example, the user information is saved. So we can draw from this. So let's put out the this is the demo output behind FF demo. So that's cool. So that's my source code change to implement that feature. Actually, I'm now ready to commit that and push that back to GitLab. So let's do this. Implemented feature, and I commit this to the implement FF demo branch, so that's already available handy here. So let's commit that and see what's going to happen. So let's head back to GitLab to check out what's going to happen. So we do have our merge request. The merge request is currently still work in progress. Resolve implement FF demo. Let's open that up quickly. And what we are seeing is that there is a pipeline running, and this pipeline will actually compile and build the application, and will ultimately end up deploying it to a review environment. So this is the environment that we can reach in order to test the functionality out. So let's check in the meantime how we are doing with our issue. So we have created by now the merge request, and we also implemented the feature flag in code. So let's check quickly whether we need to do some adjustments to the auto DevOps deployment strategy that we're having here. So let's check this out quickly. That you'll find in the settings of your very project under auto DevOps, and you're seeing that the deployment strategy is defined to be continuous deployment to production. That's fine. By defining an environment variable, I'm also enforcing a deployment to staging before that. So that's cool. So let's leave that with this. The next thing we want to do is we want to add actually the server-side component of it. So the feature flag FF demo needs to be added here, and we also need to define an appropriate activation strategy. So let's go over to this one. So that gets us straight into that feature flag section again, and now we are defining that feature flag. So the feature flag needs to have a name, and that name needs to be the exact same name that we have defined in code, because this is the unique identifier for it. The next thing we want to do is we want to define a couple of strategies. So it's I quickly go ahead and do that because it's pretty obvious what this is going to do. So the first strategy that I want to define is a strategy that makes the feature flag or the feature appearing for all users that we're having, and we can define that to be active for a certain environment by simply clicking on the plus sign here. So, and in here, we check this out because our pipeline is running and will ultimately deploy to that very review environment. This review environment is right away presented here to me. So that's the first strategy that I want to have. But I also want to have a few more strategies. So another strategy that I want to have is I want to make sure that when this later on deploys to a staging environment, I want to make sure that only certain users are going to see that feature live in that very application. And I'm going to limit that down to the user that is John Doe at gitlab.com. So that's cool. And I need to define that environment. So the staging environment is the one that I want that to have. The staging environment is not yet available. So let's create that right from here so I can actually save that, that strategy. And the final strategy that I want to define is I want to make sure that a certain set of locked in users are going to see that feature behind that very feature flag. And for simplicity's sake, I'll just take a percentage of 50%, so half of the users that are talking to the application will be seeing that very feature. And this strategy I want to have for another environment, and that's going to be the production environment. That's also not there yet, so let's create that, and that's pretty cool. So let's check whether everything is fine. So everyone who's using my review environment will be seeing that feature. Only the user John Doe on the staging environment in a test exercise is going to see that feature, and 50% of all users, when that finally deploys to production, are going to see that very feature. So create that feature flag, and we should be good to go. Let's get out of this. So, and check that off in our issue, actually. So let's see how our merge request in the meantime is doing. So it looks relatively okay from what I can tell. So I can right from here click on that merge request, jump over to that, and that's all pretty cool. So you're seeing that the pipeline has actually passed. And I could be heading over to that review environment, but that's not really a web application. So I want to test that in a slightly different way. So I want to just quickly copy that link to the clipboard, and I want to hand over to a little pre-prepared client that I did. So, and that's simply a bash script. And what I'm doing is in that very bash script, I'm defining the URL of the application where it runs. That's going to be my review environment. I'm quickly saving that. And when I now execute that client, this specific bash script, it's going to go ahead and will talk to that review environment, and it will go and register and log in with 4 predefined users that I'm having here. So it's Gronk at gitlab.com and so forth. And there's also that user John Doe at gitlab.com, and let's see what the output is going to be. So let's go ahead here. So the review environment appears to be on, and the message is that what we expected. So this is the demo output behind the feature flag. So that's all cool. So that looks good. When I'm going back to my merge request, I'm fine with that merge request as it is, and I'm resolving the work in progress status now. And the next thing I'm actually doing is I'm merging that code from that task branch back to that master branch in order to ultimately create the staging and finally the production environment. So let's do this for a moment and quickly head over to that issue to make my final things here. So I've reviewed my merge request and merge it when ready, and that's all fine. And so therefore I'm checking that off. So that's cool. The pipeline, there will be a pipeline running right now on that master branch. I'll give that some time, and while that is running, I'm preparing my linked issues so that ultimately, when everything is fine, at some point in time, I'm going to remove that that stuff again. And so let's click on that issue here. And what I just quickly want to do is I simply want to go ahead and edit the due date. So I'll define a date. I will also assign it to myself in this case, that I'm going to be doing that work again. But let's see how we're doing with our pipeline in the meantime. So the easiest way to check that out is going to jump back to that original issue, and from there back to that merge request that is about implementing that. So when we check this out, let's have a look here. So there's still the pipeline running for that merge to the master branch. So you can see what this is doing here. So the build has already passed, so that's pretty good. So what does it mean when the build passes? It will actually create a Docker image. It will place it. It will place it into our Docker container registry. So if you want to see that quickly, let's do this, and let's jump over to that one. So you can see here that I have, for the various environments that I have pre-prepared. So there is, for example, the image repository here. So this is the f of demo master, and you're seeing that that Docker image as it created. That is why I was using Golang, because it gives me some quite nice small images, and that's pretty cool from a demo perspective. So how is my pipeline doing? Pipeline is not yet through, so let's quickly check that out. Let's click on that to see the log output of that very pipeline. So you're seeing that my GitLab runner is kicking in, ultimately getting to the images, and by using Helm Tiller will deploy that to the Kubernetes cluster. So that's all pretty cool, and it does look like the job has succeeded. What basically means my environment should be by now available. So let's check that out again by going back to that merge request. The merge request is of course merged now, so it is available here, and it shows me that my pipeline has actually deployed to staging some time ago. So the next thing that I'm doing is I'm getting again a link to that specific review, to that staging environment, because I want to make sure that my client is able to test that out as well. I will do this in a second, but the other thing that I'm doing is here for the pipeline is I'm assuming everything is going to be okay, and in the interest of time, I'm already starting to deploy it out to production, so to give that GitLab runner a little bit more time to do that. But let's go ahead and look at our client here in this case. So what I'm doing is, as far as the URLs are concerned, I'm adding another one. So that's going to be the staging environment, as you can see here. So it's also has staging in the name. So I'm just making sure it's HTTPS, and I'm executing that script. So as you can see, it comes back to me and says the review environment is down. So that when we merge that change to the master branch, by the same time the review environment has been tiered down. So that's pretty okay. So that's no longer available. And now you can see in the output, you can see the output of all the various API calls. So we're getting 2 times hello world for the user Gronk and R. Gronkowski and Joan Doe, and this is in sync with our activation strategy of that feature flag, is actually going to get this demo output behind that feature flag with that specific name. And Ninja at GitLab.com is going to get the usual hello world again. So that was nice and expected. So let's head back to GitLab and see how the deployment to production is actually going. So let's do this. The pipeline is running. The deployment job, oh, well, it's done. So that's pretty cool. So this is it's going to be done here. So let's check that. Let's check that out in operation environments. So this will now give me an overview of the various environments that I'm having here. So you're seeing the production environment and you're seeing the staging environment. They both have deployed the same source code. So that's the same image and the same commit char. So that's cool. The next thing I really only want to have is the URL to talk to that very production environment. So let's change our client one more time by talking actually to that production environment and see what we are getting out of that. So let's run that client one more time. You can still see the review environment still down. That's to be expected. And then there is a couple more things. So you're seeing the first one was the staging environment. So hello world, and then the feature flag for John Doe. That's pretty cool. And now we're talking here to that actual production environment, what is also up. And you're seeing an output for the user Gronk. This is the demo output. Then hello world for the second user. The third one is going to get the feature flag output again. And finally, Ninja gets hello world. So that's a stunning 50%. So that's all looking pretty good. So that's exactly what we expected. So that's fine. So this is how we can define the feature flags and activate it and deactivate it. And it's possible, for example, it's possible in operations, feature flags, to switch it on and off. I can do this quickly. So I'm switching the feature flag functionality off. That means the source code and the deployed code is still the same. And when I'm running this client here now, what everyone is going to get is a nice and clean hello world. So the feature flag is effectively switched off. That's the whole purpose of the feature flag in the first place. So that's fine. But let's go back and say, well, some time has passed and we want to go back and remove that feature flag from the code again. Let's have a look at our issues here. So I have prepared that issue, remove feature flag demo. So that's cool. It tells me what I'm supposed to be doing. I should navigate to the merge request of the linked issue and revert that merge request by creating a new merge request. That's pretty easy to do, and it comes in handy that I link the issues together. So I can go back to my original implementation of that feature flag. So that's cool. So that's the original issue, all the things are ticked off, and it's linked to the resolve implement feature flag demo merge request. I can also go to that right away. And the next thing I'm going to do, this merge request resulted in merging a certain commit back to the master branch. So it's cool. And if I want to get rid of all that functionality again, as easy as possible, I can simply click on revert. And when I'm clicking on revert on that merge request, I'm presented with the option to create a new merge request that actually undoes the functionality. And that's exactly what I want to do. So I click on revert, gives me a new merge request. That's all pretty cool. And this is going to revert the merge request number 1. And one final thing I'm doing is I'm writing a closes hashtag a closes hashtag to remove feature flag demo issue again, so that when this merge request comes through, it's all going to be done automatically. So I'm simply submitting that merge request. And as with every merge request, a review is going to generate it, and it's going to be compiled one more time with the changes and all that kind of stuff, and I can inspect that. But I do trust the system to work properly. So for that very reason, I'm simply selecting the option to merge that to the master branch when the pipeline succeeds here in this case. So I click on that one, and that would basically take care of all the work. So it will be running the test environment. It will be enabling me to talk to the review environment. But when that's all successful, it's also going to automatically merge back to master, and I should be good to go. So that concludes my demo here. I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, please ask.